Steel Pietà. Awakening. Part 2. Pandora.
A brief, sharp warning tone sounded in the cockpit. Not a distress signal, but an insistent notification. We have arrived. A new beacon lit up on the HUD. Target, 4.8 kilometers. As the range closed, it was joined by a cascade of warnings. Terrain anomaly, high turbulence risk. Custodian throttled back, engaging the precise approach sequence. The maneuvering thrusters bellowed. The desert abruptly dropped away beneath them. The Great Solaran Canyon was a raw, tectonic scar, a dry, desolate rupture across the planet's fractured shell. The walls, arranged in layers of rock like the pages of an old, yellowed book, dropped thousands of meters into the gloom below. As they breached the fissure, the cockpit chimed again. Alert. Airflow fluctuation. Copernicus plunged into a zone where the canyon turned the atmosphere into a grinder. They were jolted downward, but the ship corrected its flight almost instantly.
What was that?
Oscar asked immediately. Custodian cut the main thrust, relied fully on the RCS thrusters, and the vessel began to coast and drift more than fly. They descended slowly into the canyon, heading toward the target marker. On the wall before them, roughly halfway up, a shape appeared that was too uniform to be the work of erosion. A rectangular alcove bordered by a deliberate, carved frame. Deep inside it, massive iron doors marked a hangar entrance. However, the hangar itself was choked with rock. Debris lay like a fallen curtain, evidence of a recent earthquake. Beside it, a fresh fault, a bright, ragged scar cut across the darker stone. Broken masonry lay scattered on the ledges above, creating a broad fan of scree at the canyon floor. Custodian recognized the crack and the rubble from the gatekeeper's footage. The only difference was that the column of black smoke had dissipated, replaced by a gentle thread of white steam. A new warning blared in the cockpit. Unstable massive. The system flagged several points in red. The potential for another rock slide and the risk of aftershocks. Custodian nudged the ship cautiously toward the hangar and the debris field. He scanned the terrain for a place to set down. The broad platform near the entrance was tempting, but the rock fragments peeling away from the cliff face made stopping uninviting. Furthermore, Collector's crew could arrive at any second. The risk was simply too high. He flew a good distance, hugging the canyon floor. He located a narrow offshoot, a lateral corridor in the rock face, so tight that from an aerial view it appeared to be just a fissure. He dropped into the bottom, his maneuvering thrusters humming like a drowsing beast of prey. The hull slipped into the deep shadow, cutting overhead visibility to a minimum. C-77 touched down gently and powered down all non-essential emitters. A deep silence settled in the cockpit. Only a single HUD indicator offered a steady, quiet pulse. Target, 2.1 kilometers. Custodian deployed a drone from a small access hatch on the ship's upper hull and sent it on a reconnaissance sweep. He then handed over control of the unit to Oscar.
Do you receive the image?
Yes. What should I be looking at?
Everything. Be a second pair of sensors.
He reached into the compartment and pulled out a heavy revolver with a rectangular barrel. He checked the cartridges, secured the cylinder, and rose from his seat. He turned to face Oscar.
Stay on the ship. Monitor the radar and the drone signals. The moment any visitors show up, notify me at once.
09 nodded, watching C-77 secure the revolver to the magnetic thigh holster and strap on an antique leather backpack. He also grabbed the grapple gun, stepped onto the elevator, and rode it down to the surface. The floor of the great Solaran Canyon spread out before him, awash in the blinding white and rusty red of the rocks. Even as evening drew near, this merciless heat continued to stream down the sheer walls, causing the entire landscape to waver like a corrupted archival recording. He found solace in a single fact. At this ambient temperature, the heat signature of his armor and his ship would not be easily detected.
Do you know how to distinguish a fool from a robot acting with a plan?
The ghost asked, stirred by the heat.
You don't. And that's why you're here.
The reconnaissance drone hummed overhead, running its routine passes. It was the first to register movement among the nearby rocks. 3 desert jackals whined, tearing at the carcass of some local creature. They lifted their heads, hearing the robot's steps. When they saw him, they made no move, clearly knowing his metal form was neither a meal nor a threat. The second half of the trek proved relentless. The heat had baked his armor and the systems beneath his plates to critical temperatures, and the path began to climb. The actuators in his knees and calves protested with a high-pitched whine at every step, scattering sand toward the canyon floor. It took half an hour. Just when he was certain his overheated hardware was about to seize, he finally reached a flat rock shelf where a set of stairs began. The old steps led up the slope directly to the hangar. They were uneven, worn, and chipped in many places, but they promised a more comfortable climb than the trek had been so far. Beneath them, in a recess, he found a door. The lock panel was inactive, and the entrance itself was sealed tight. Finding no way to open it, he glanced back toward the stairs, a flicker of reluctance in his optics.
A climb up Mount Overheat for the privilege of inspecting a wreck. And the punchline is, the wreck is already spoken for. Collector bought the rights. One of the few robots you definitely don't want to cross. That's what you call optimization. You can congratulate yourself. You are perfect proof that computers are sometimes wrong too.
Can you stop?
He answered reflexively.
I can, but then you'll die. I am the part of your consciousness that keeps you functioning.
I managed fine for over 600 cycles without your input.
You weren't a conscious machine for 600 years. Don't flatter yourself.
All right, 500.
300 tops. And for the first 100 of those, you never left the cathedral, hunting for humanity in every forgotten access port of a campus the size of a server farm.
Custodian started climbing the stairs. The actuators squeaked with effort again.
That's rich, coming from a sliver of code that hasn't left its memory module in 200 years.
Not out of cowardice, but from lack of limbs. I don't have the legs, you do. And right now you're wearing them out, dragging me and yourself up crumbling stairs in heat that exceeds all norms, just to visit a wreck. You must really like scraps.
It's not a scrap. It's a record of the history of the species that created us all.
It's junk, with ownership rights in the hands of the collector. Don't turn it into a relic of faith.
So what?
He stopped, looking down from halfway up the stairs.
Should I turn back?
Bingo! Unless you have a death wish.
Nonsense. So close to the goal.
He moved toward the hangar again.
I'm going. All anomalies residing in my circuits are coming with me.
I go because I have no choice. You go because you are afflicted with romantic delusions.
Custodian crested the stairs and moved toward the cool shadows of the interior.
Hope, and a cybernetic brain crammed with terabytes on a primate species so advanced it engineered its own extinction.
He stepped past the debris field and reached the iron gate, noting the rupture in its structure.
because they deemed the top priority on a newly discovered planet was to binge on the local toadstools.
He entered the hangar, and the ghost's voice was instantly submerged beneath the torrent of data streaming through his sensors. The high ceiling vanished into the cool darkness. The vault had cracked like an eggshell. A narrow rift admitted a wedge of sunlight that sliced the air into two distinct fields. One bright, filled with dust motes dancing like ash, and one dark, thick with cold beneath the supporting ribs. The wreck lay there, a vessel no more, but a mass that gravity and time contended over. The earthquake had torn the floor plate across. The fissure was black, uneven, and full of crumbling scree. The hull had partially sunk into it, wedged at an angle. One side rested against the wall of the chasm. The other disappeared under the debris. A wispy stream of white vapor seeped from its interior and drifted toward the ceiling breach. The ghost's voice returned like music swelling by degrees.
So pardon my skepticism regarding all this romantic nonsense. Just grab your metal posterior and let's find a place to refuel.
Shut up! We are here.
Oscar sent the reconnaissance drone into the hangar through the breach in the ceiling. The rotor's dull buzz echoed in the enclosed space, sounding like an empty drum. The machine hovered above Custodian's head. Fragments of markings still clung to the flank, a faded Astrogen logo, and the name Pandora, its letters looking as if they'd been clawed into the metal. 09 opened a voice link.
Doesn't look like much at first glance.
He said,
But the sensors say the wreck's position is stable, assuming we don't get another tremor.
C77 didn't answer right away. His optics zoomed in on the name.
Understood.
He said at last.
Get the drone back to the surface and keep an eye out for unwelcome guests. And then, try to catch a link with the nearest satellite. Any satellite.
A satellite?
Oscar hesitated.
I need archival data. A name, a registry entry, old manifests. Anything that survived in the legacy databases.
In databases from 800 years ago?
Oscar let out a dry breath.
I'll do what I can, but don't expect a miracle.
The channel went quiet. The drone rose, slipped into the fissure slicing through the roof, and vanished. The wreck lay at the bottom of the hangar like a wounded animal, half swallowed by a black fissure in the floor. Custodian stepped to the edge. His scanners shifted into precision mode, outlines, angles, and distortions in plating. The geometry of the damage resolved into a map that led to a single question. Where is the airlock? Human ships never liked being opened from the outside. Their security was rigid by definition. Any easy way in was a liability. But almost all of them left a back door, an emergency service hatch, an access point, or something you could unlock without the crew present, if you knew where to look. C77 ran the scan results and felt disappointment. Out of all the options, only one remained. A round hatch on the dorsal spine of the hull, high up on a smooth curve of plating. He jumped from the edge of the fissure onto the hull. Metal answered with a dull thud. The echo rolled through the hangar like a warning. He moved toward the hatch, testing every step. The touch panel glowed. It shouldn't. A sweep of his hand cleared dust from the screen, revealing a red padlock icon and the word locked. Beside it, tucked under the edge of a cover, a hidden service port waited. Custodian pulled a small terminal from his pack, plugged in a lead, and began the procedure. The display flooded with strings of code as the program dug into the security layer. Minutes passed in the hangar's stillness, broken only by the terminal's faint buzz. At last the screen flashed OK. The hatch answered with a dry snap of disengaging bolts. C77 stowed the terminal, gripped the cover, and lifted it. As it opened, cool air, heavy and stale, breathed out from inside. Custodian slipped into the opening and dropped. He landed in the airlock. The deck was listing severely, forcing his servos to instantly recalibrate his center of gravity. The magnetic grips in his soles engaged with the hull plating a moment later. The metal was cold and slick, the airlock's interior weeping with condensation. He slammed the upper hatch shut. The seal resisted, then locked. The airlock's display panel flashed. Warning: ATM, hazardous, filtration status, isolation. A lone lock icon blinked on the side console. He quickly tapped the screen and initiated a sequence. The inner door actuators groaned and seized up. For a moment, silence was absolute. Then a second, more forceful surge broke it, and the airlock finally submitted. The inner doors slid open just wide enough for Custodian's shoulders. Beyond lay a corridor. Due to the ship's tilt, the passage dropped away sideways, defying intuition. Black bundles of cables, like dead vines, trailed from the ceiling. Lighting was sporadic. Segments flickered, going dark for a few seconds before reigniting in an erratic rhythm, pulsing like a failing heart. The deep silence inside was broken only by distant, sporadic, and ominous crackles of metal. He took his first step. The metal under his foot groaned, but the sound died at once, swallowed by the empty passage. His scanners unspooled a translucent map across his field of view. By old human design logic, mess hall, galley, and sanitation. Farther on, branches toward engineering and the bridge.
I'll give you one thing,
The ghost said.
It's a beautiful place for a tomb. On a sunny planet, in the side of a mountain, and among forgotten machinery. Romantic. Just the way you like it.
C-77 didn't answer. He advanced slowly, keeping his balance on the tilted deck. The mess hall door was ajar. He nudged it with his shoulder and stepped inside. A table and chairs were bolted to the floor. On a wall, a board bore the ghost of a chalk note, a blurred white smear in the brown of rust. In the corner stood a water dispenser. Its drip tray was crusted with mineral scale. An industrial refrigerator sat open by a finger's width. Inside were black, rotten remnants of what might once have been rations. Water had collected on the deck, not in neat puddles, but in thin, rust-colored streaks running downhill along the slant. This moisture and oxygen had done their work for years, in places eating the metal clean through. He left the common section and headed toward the bridge. This corridor was less damaged, as if the hull had shielded it from the worst of the impact. The door had no power, but the mechanical override still worked. He forced it open by hand. The bridge was drowned in dimness. A single active terminal, built into the nav station, blinked with a weak light, as if pleading for attention. C-77 stepped closer and wiped the dust from the screen. Under the grime, the interface appeared. Archaic, but readable. System, emergency power. Battery, 3%. He tapped the screen. It momentarily went blank before displaying the ship's schematic. A simplified layout of modules and section designations. 3 points were highlighted: mainframe, reactor, laboratory. He was about to leave when a fourth label snagged his attention: Epsilon node. He pressed the room's outline on the diagram. The miniature expanded into a schematic map of the space, showing hundreds of rectangles in 4 rows, connected by lines to a machine against one wall. Beside the map was a data readout: Epsilon node, containment, breached. Crops, 99.58% failure.
A secret room at the end of the maze?
The ghost murmured.
Looks like you won't escape your romantic streak today.
His commentary remained relentless, but Custodian ignored him as usual. Just then, the comm channel burst with static as Oscar hailed him.
C-77. I've got something. I snagged a weak handshake with a relay satellite. The archives are fragmented, but I found a manifest.
Go ahead.
The ship Pandora, Astrogen entry, classification, mobile laboratory,
He paused, as if reading in disbelief.
agrarian development unit, experimental crops, hydroponics, plant adaptation to alien environments.
Pandora as a cultivation lab.
The ghost scoffed in his head.
What next? Cerberus as a mail freighter.
Something definitely doesn't add up.
He murmured, forgetting the open comm line.
What does not add up?
Oscar asked.
My apologies. A subroutine for skeptical analysis decided to leave a comment in my memory. I spoke it aloud, inadvertently.
You're an old robot, aren't you? Old bots supposedly develop an anomaly called a subconscious. You should run an ANN diagnostic.
Thanks for the worry.
He replied, and cut the connection. He left the bridge. With the map now committed to memory, his steps were more assured, though the slanting corridors continued to defy the laws of geometry. As he approached the laboratory, the chemical sensors registered elevated humidity and trace fractions of degraded cryoprotectants, clinging to the air like a breath preserved by time and silence. Inside stood rows of cryogenic cylinders, douars designed for long-term biological stasis. Their control panels were dead. Only a few indicator LEDs remained, glowing with the dull red haze of failure. He opened one of the cylinders. The hinge protested softly, as if resisting the motion. Inside were empty cryogenic cassettes, wet with condensation and rusted at the edges. The liquid nitrogen had long since boiled away after the loss of power. Pressure regulation and temperature control had ceased to exist. The biological material had passed through successive phases of thawing and degradation until all cellular structures collapsed. At the bottom of the container remained only a dark residue, denatured proteins and fragmented membranes. The genetic information was gone, irreversibly lost. He closed the door, gently. The mainframe compartment lay farther down the corridor. The computing section was surprisingly intact. The server cabinet stood like a monolith. A single emergency diode burned on the panel. C77 tried the terminal link. No response. On an old, worn mechanical keyboard, he keyed diagnostic commands, but the screen remained stubbornly blank. Only after a long pause did it blink and print a message in the upper right corner. Mainframe halted. Minimum power mode.
The ship is dying.
Exactly.
C77 whispered.
Time to find the reactor. But first...
He didn't finish. He turned to the racks and began pulling data cartridges from their front bays. That was why he'd come, for the record. He packed the drives into his backpack, nesting them in foam and anti-static wrap. Then he moved on. The closer he got to the reactor, the more his sensors began to complain. A new line kept flashing in his field of view. Radiation elevated. The corridor to the reactor chamber was narrower, more industrial. The walls exposed service channels. In several places, the plating bulged, as if something had pressed from within or tried to get out. He stopped at the threshold where the readings began to climb faster. 1 more meter, half a meter. The software kept insisting the dose was safe for his frame, but instinct, that anomaly born centuries ago, told him to keep his distance. The reactor bay lay in darkness. In the center, it stood. Not a standard tokamak, but an experimental polywell. The sphere was torn open, and from within, like ribs, protruded rings of the electromagnetic cage, shifted and twisted out of alignment. Everything was cold, extinguished, dead, and yet it still radiated the aftertaste of former power. He stepped into the control nook and found a technical console. He read the lines. Reactor offline. Emergency battery, 3%. Priority power routing, Epsilon node. Warning, total power loss in 23 hours, 21 minutes.
Rust, take me.
The ghost spat.
Does that mean this ship sat buried in rock for centuries with power, and you arrived exactly when the last spark is about to die?
C-77 stared at the numbers as if they were in order. 81% of the remaining energy, almost everything still left, was being routed to a single destination. Not to the bridge, not to the mainframe, not to life support, only to the compartment marked as the Epsilon node. It was a deliberate decision to preserve a set of experimental crop lines that, according to the ship's own status, had a 99.58% failure rate.